Nathan Carter stood in the freezing garage at midnight, staring at the black SUV idling outside and the woman stepping out of it like she owned the entire town. She did, actually. Vivian Sterling, billionaire CEO, ice queen of the tech world, and about to make him an offer that sounded completely insane. Marry her for 1 year, save his dying daughter, and pretend to be a family while corporate assassins tried to destroy them both. He had $17 in his bank account and a medical bill that would bury him by morning. She had enemies who made people disappear. Neither of them knew that this fake arrangement would turn into the most dangerous and real thing either of them had ever survived. If you want to see how far a desperate man and a ruthless CEO will go when everything falls apart, stick around until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Nathan Carter's hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. He stood under the fluorescent lights of his garage bay, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and rust, staring at the eviction notice taped to his toolbox. 3 months overdue on rent. The landlord had been patient, more patient than Nathan deserved, but patience didn't pay bills. And sympathy didn't fix the fact that his 8-year-old daughter needed a surgery that cost more than he'd earn in 2 years. The garage was empty. It was almost 10 at night, and the last customer had picked up their car 6 hours ago. Nathan should have gone home, but home meant facing Ellie's worried face and pretending everything was fine when it absolutely wasn't. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted down to his bones. The sound of tires crunching on snow made him look up. A black SUV rolled slowly into the lot, expensive and completely out of place in this part of Black Ridge. The kind of vehicle that screamed money, power, and people who didn't belong anywhere near a failing auto shop in the frozen armpit of Montana. Nathan stepped toward the bay door, squinting through the glass. The SUV stopped, the engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a magazine spread, tall, sharp, dressed in a long black coat that probably cost more than Nathan's truck. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, her expression cold and unreadable. She moved like someone who didn't waste time on anything that didn't serve a purpose. Nathan's first thought was that she'd gotten lost. His second thought was that people like her didn't get lost. They showed up exactly where they intended to be. She walked toward this garage door, and Nathan met her outside. "We're closed," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. The woman stopped a few feet away, studying him with eyes that felt like they could see straight through him. "Nathan Carter?" He tensed. "Who's asking?" "Vivian Sterling." The name hit him like a punch to the chest. Everyone in Black Ridge knew who Vivian Sterling was. Hell, everyone in the country knew. She'd built Sterling Dynamics from nothing, turned it into a tech empire worth billions, and done it all before she turned 30. The business magazines called her a genius. The gossip blogs called her a heartless ice queen. Either way, she was untouchable, and she was standing in his garage. "What do you want?" Nathan asked slowly. Vivian's expression didn't change. "I want to make you an offer. I don't think there's anything I've got that you'd want." "That's where you're wrong." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, holding it out toward him. "You need money. I need a husband." Nathan stared at her, completely thrown. "Excuse me?" "No, not a real one," Vivian said flatly. "A contract marriage. 1 year. You play the part of a stable, dependable family man. I pay off your debts, cover your daughter's medical expenses, and give you enough to rebuild your business." Nathan took the paper, unfolding it slowly. It was a contract, dense, legal, and terrifyingly specific. His eyes caught on the numbers, and his stomach dropped. "This is insane," he said. "It's practical. You're offering me $500,000 to marry you." "To pretend to marry me," Vivian corrected. "For 1 year. After that, we divorce quietly and you walk away with everything I promised." Nathan looked up at her, searching for any sign that this was a joke. But Vivian Sterling didn't look like someone who joked about anything. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you're exactly what I need," Vivian said. "A single father, local, blue collar, no criminal record, no scandals. You're unremarkable in all the right ways." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Thanks." "I'm not trying to insult you," Vivian said, her tone still flat and businesslike. "I'm telling you why this works. I need someone who looks stable, someone who can help me keep custody of my niece and maintain my position as CEO, while my company is under attack. Your niece? Vivian's expression flickered, just for a second, before going cold again. My younger sister disappeared 6 months ago. She left behind a 6-year-old daughter. I'm her legal guardian now, but there are people trying to take that away from me. Nathan frowned. Who? Investors. Board members. People who want me out of the company. Vivian's voice stayed calm, controlled, but Nathan could hear the steel underneath. They're claiming I'm emotionally unstable, that I'm not fit to raise a child alone. If I can prove I have a stable home life, a husband, a family, they lose their leverage. Nathan stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Nathan stared. So you want me to lie? I want you to survive, Vivian said, and I'm offering you the means to do it. Nathan's hands tightened on the contract. He thought about Ellie, small and pale in her hospital bed last week, trying to smile even though he knew she was scared. He thought about the medical bills stacked on his kitchen table, the eviction notice, the slow collapse of everything he'd worked for. This is insane, he said again, quieter this time. Maybe, Vivian said, but you're out of options, and so am I. She wasn't wrong. Nathan looked down at the contract again, his mind racing. If I say yes, you and your daughter move into my house immediately, Vivian said. You'll have your own space. Your daughter will have access to the best doctors in the state. You'll attend public events with me when necessary, maintain the appearance of a marriage, and stay out of my way otherwise. And after a year, we divorce. You keep the money. You go back to your life, Mas. Nathan exhaled slowly, his breath fogging in the cold air. What's the catch? Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. The catch is that if you break the contract early, you don't get paid. And if you tell anyone the truth about this arrangement, I will bury you in legal fees so deep you'll never see daylight again. Nathan believed her. He folded the contract and looked at her for a long moment. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning, Vivian said. She turned and walked back toward the SUV, moving with the same cold precision she'd arrived with. Nathan watched her go, his mind spinning. Halfway to the vehicle, Vivian paused and looked back. For what it's worth, Mr. Carter, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to help me protect my family. If you can do that, we'll both get what we need. Then she got into the SUV and drove away, leaving Nathan standing alone in the snow with a contract that could either save his life or destroy it. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the contract, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. Ellie was asleep upstairs, her breathing soft and steady through the baby monitor he still kept, even though she insisted she was too old for it. The contract was real. The money was real. And Vivian Sterling was offering him a way out of the hole he'd been drowning in for years. But it felt wrong. It felt like selling himself. Nathan leaned back in his chair, scrubbing his hands over his face. He thought about his ex-wife, Sarah, who'd left 5 years ago when the shop started failing and Ellie got sick. She'd said she couldn't handle it. The stress, the fear, the constant struggle. She'd packed her bags and disappeared, and Nathan hadn't heard from her since. He'd raised Ellie alone after that. Worked double shifts, skipped meals, sold everything he could. And still, it hadn't been enough. Now a stranger was offering him $500,000 to pretend to be her husband for a year. Nathan looked at the medical bills stacked on the counter. He thought about Ellie's next appointment. The way the doctor had gently explained that without the surgery, her condition would only get worse. He thought about losing her. And he made his decision. Posek. The next morning, Nathan called the number on the contract. Vivian answered on the second ring. Mr. Carter? I'll do it, Nathan said. There was a pause. Then Vivian said, Good. I'll have my lawyer finalize the paperwork today. You and your daughter can move in this weekend. Wait, this weekend? The board meeting is Monday, Vivian said. I need you in place before then. Nathan exhaled slowly. All right, fine. One more thing, Vivian said, her voice cool and businesslike. Don't tell your daughter the truth. As far as she's concerned, this is real. Nathan's stomach twisted. You want me to lie to my kid? I want her to be convincing, Vivian said. Children are terrible liars. If she believes it's real, everyone else will too. Nathan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Vivian was right. Fine, he said quietly. Good. I'll send a car for you Saturday morning. The line went dead. Nathan set the phone down and stared at the contract one last time. Then he went upstairs to figure out how the hell he was going to explain this to Ellie. Saturday morning came too fast. Nathan stood in the driveway with Ellie, watching a sleek black car pull up to the curb. Ellie clutched her backpack, her eyes wide with excitement and confusion. "Dad, whose car is that?" she asked. "A friend's, Nathan said, forcing a smile. "We're going to stay with her for a while." "Why?" "Because she needs our help," Nathan said. "And because she's going to help us too." Ellie frowned, clearly not understanding, but she didn't argue. She trusted him. That made Nathan's chest ache. The driver loaded their bags into the trunk, and Nathan helped Ellie into the back seat before sliding in beside her. The car pulled away from their small, cramped rental house, and Nathan watched it disappear in the rearview mirror. Ellie pressed her face to the window, watching the town roll by. "Where does your friend live?" "Outside town," Nathan said. "By the lake." Ellie's eyes lit up. "The big lake? The one with the fancy houses?" Nathan nodded. Ellie grinned. "Cool." Nathan wished he felt the same way. Titten. The house was even bigger than Nathan had imagined. It sat on a hill overlooking the frozen lake, all glass and steel in sharp modern lines. It looked like something out of an architecture magazine, beautiful, cold, and completely intimidating. The car pulled up to the front entrance, and Nathan helped Ellie out. The front door opened, and Vivian stepped out. She looked exactly the same as she had in the garage, perfectly composed, perfectly controlled. But there was something different in her eyes when she looked at Ellie, something almost soft. "You must be Ellie," Vivian said, her voice losing some of its usual sharpness. Ellie stared up at her, wide-eyed. "Are you Dad's friend?" Vivian's gaze flicked to Nathan, then back to Ellie. "I am. My name is Vivian." Ellie smiled shyly. "Hi." "Icky." Vivian's expression didn't change, but Nathan thought he saw the tiniest crack in her armor. "Come inside, Vivian," Vivian said, stepping aside. "I'll show you your rooms." Nathan and Ellie followed her into the house, and Nathan's breath caught. The interior was just as stunning as the exterior. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was pristine, organized, untouched. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a showroom. Vivian led them upstairs, her heels clicking against the polished floors. She stopped in front of a door and pushed it open. "This is yours," she said, looking at Ellie. Ellie stepped inside and gasped. The room was huge, bigger than their entire apartment back in town. There was a canopy bed, a desk, shelves filled with books, and a window that overlooked the lake. "This is mine?" Ellie whispered. "It is," Vivian said. Ellie turned to Nathan, her face glowing. "Dad, this is amazing." Nathan forced a smile. "Yeah, kiddo, it is." Vivian gestured down the hall. "Your room is next door, Mr. Carter. You'll have your own bathroom and closet. If you need anything, the staff will take care of it." Nathan nodded, still trying to process the fact that this was his life now. Ellie was already exploring her new room, opening drawers and inspecting the books on the shelves. Vivian watched her for a moment, then looked at Nathan. "We need to talk. Downstairs. 5 minutes." She left before Nathan could respond. Nathan waited until Ellie was distracted, then slipped out of the room and headed downstairs. Vivian was waiting in the kitchen, a massive, industrial-looking space that looked like it had never been used. She stood by the island, her arms crossed. "There are rules, she said the moment Nathan walked in. "Of course there are," Nathan muttered. Vivian ignored him. "First, no one outside this house can know the truth about this arrangement. Not your friends, not your family, no one." "Got it." "Second, you attend every public event I ask you to. Charity galas, board dinners, press appearances. You smile, you play the part, and you don't embarrass me." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Understood." "Well, third, you stay out of my business. I don't need you asking questions or getting involved in things that don't concern you." "Fine." Vivian studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "And fourth, your daughter is off limits to the press. No interviews, no photos without my approval." I won't have her dragged into this. Nathan's anger softened slightly. Agreed. Vivian nodded. Good. The board meeting is Monday. I'll introduce you as my husband. From that point forward, we're married in the eyes of everyone who matters. Nathan exhaled slowly. This is insane. You've said that before. Because it's still true. Vivian's expression didn't change. Get used to it, Mr. Carter. This is your life now. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Nathan standing alone in the cold, perfect house. That night, Nathan lay awake in his new room, staring at the ceiling. Everything about this felt wrong. The house was too big, too cold, too empty. Vivian was a stranger. The whole arrangement was built on lies. But when he thought about Ellie, sleeping peacefully down the hall, safe and warm and finally able to get the surgery she needed, he knew he'd made the right choice, even if it destroyed him in the process. The next morning, Nathan woke to the sound of voices downstairs. He pulled on a shirt and headed down, following the noise to the living room. Ellie was sitting on the floor, playing with a small girl Nathan didn't recognize. The girl looked about Ellie's age, with dark hair and wide, cautious eyes. She didn't speak, but she watched Ellie carefully, like she was trying to decide if she was safe. Vivian stood near the window, watching them. Nathan walked over to her. That's your niece? Vivian nodded. Chloe. Nathan studied the little girl. She looked fragile, guarded. She doesn't talk much? She doesn't talk at all, Vivian said quietly. Not since her mother disappeared. Nathan's chest tightened. Jesus. Vivian's expression stayed cold, but Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders. The doctors say it's trauma. She'll speak again when she's ready. Nathan watched Ellie hand Chloe a stuffed animal, smiling brightly. Chloe took it slowly, her fingers trembling. Ellie's good with her, Nathan said. I noticed, Vivian said. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the two girls. Then Vivian said, The board meeting is tomorrow. You'll need to wear a suit. Nathan glanced at her. I don't own a suit. Vivian's mouth twitched, almost like she wanted to smile but didn't know how. I had one delivered to your room this morning. It should fit. Nathan shook his head. You think of everything, don't you? I have to, Vivian said. If I don't, people die. The words were cold, matter of fact, and they sent a chill down Nathan's spine. He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her expression told him not to push. Not yet. Much. The board meeting was every bit as intimidating as Nathan had feared. He sat beside Vivian at a long, polished table surrounded by men in expensive suits who looked at him like he was a stain on their perfect world. Vivian introduced him as her husband, and Nathan forced himself to smile and shake hands and pretend like he belonged there. He didn't. The meeting dragged on for hours. Talk of quarterly reports, investments, stock prices. Nathan understood maybe half of it. Mostly, he just sat quietly and tried not to look like he wanted to bolt. But then one of the board members, a silver-haired man named Richard Caldwell, leaned forward and smiled at Vivian in a way that made Nathan's skin crawl. I have to say, Vivian, this is quite the surprise, Caldwell said. A sudden marriage, a ready-made family. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Vivian's expression didn't change. I don't see how my personal life is relevant to this meeting, Richard. Oh, it's very relevant, Caldwell said smoothly. Especially when there are questions about your stability, your ability to lead this company while also caring for a traumatized child. Nathan's hands tightened on the armrests. Vivian stayed calm. My personal life is stable. My family is stable. And my ability to lead this company has never been in question. Caldwell's smile widened. We'll see about that. The meeting ended shortly after, and Nathan followed Vivian out of the building. The moment they were alone in the car, Nathan turned to her. Who the hell was that guy? Richard Caldwell, Vivian said, her voice tight, one of the largest investors in the company, and one of the people trying to remove me as CEO. Nathan's jaw clenched. He's an asshole. He's dangerous, Vivian corrected, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. Nathan looked at her, studying the tension in her face. What does he want? Vivian stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Control, power, everything I've built. Imashmako. Nathan exhaled slowly, and he'll use Chloe to get it. Vivian didn't answer, but Nathan could see the fear in her eyes. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Nathan realized that Vivian Sterling, the Ice Queen, the untouchable CEO, was just as terrified as he was. She was just better at hiding it. Quiet. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Ellie slowly settled into their new life. Ellie loved the house. She loved her new room, the lake, the endless space to explore. She and Chloe became inseparable, playing together every day, building forts and drawing pictures and slowly coaxing Chloe out of her shell. Nathan spent his days trying to figure out how to exist in Vivian's world. It wasn't easy. The house was always cold. Staff members moved through the halls like ghosts, silent and efficient. Security guards patrolled the property day and night, and Vivian herself was a constant, distant presence, always working, always on the phone, always one step ahead of whatever disaster was coming next. But sometimes, late at night, Nathan would find her in the kitchen. She'd be sitting on the island, staring at her laptop, a cup of cold coffee forgotten beside her. The first time it happened, Nathan almost turned around and left. But something stopped him. "You ever sleep?" he asked, walking over to the coffee maker. Vivian glanced up, her expression guarded. Not much. Nathan poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. "You're going to burn out. I don't have that luxury." Nathan studied her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, tension in every line of her body. "When's the last time you took a break?" "Boo?" Vivian's mouth twitched. "I don't remember." Nathan shook his head. "That's not healthy. Neither is losing everything I've built." Nathan didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the distant creak of the house settling. Then Vivian said, "Thank you." Nathan looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For being good to Chloe," Vivian said quietly, "and for not asking too many questions." Nathan smiled slightly. "Don't worry, I've got plenty of questions. I'm just saving them for later." Vivian almost smiled. Almost. Then her phone buzzed and the moment was gone. She stood, picking up her laptop. "I have to take this." Nathan watched her leave, disappearing into the cold, empty house. And he couldn't help but wonder what kind of life Vivian Sterling had built for herself, and whether it was worth protecting. A few days later, Nathan was outside fixing the security gate when he found the first clue. The gate had been malfunctioning for weeks, and Vivian's security team hadn't been able to fix it. Nathan, who'd spent half his life fixing broken things, offered to take a look. He was rewiring the control panel when he noticed something odd. A small external drive hidden inside the panel housing, wired directly into the security system. Nathan pulled it out, frowning. It didn't belong there. He pocketed the drive and finished the repair, his mind racing. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Nathan plugged the drive into his laptop. It was encrypted, but whoever had hidden it hadn't been very careful. Nathan cracked the password in less than 10 minutes. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Financial records, encrypted emails, contracts with shell companies, and a series of notes written by someone named Claire Sterling, Vivian's missing sister. The notes detailed corruption inside Sterling Dynamics, illegal defense contracts, money laundering, and a list of names, board members, investors, executives, all involved in covering it up. Nathan's hand shook as he scrolled through the files. This wasn't just corporate drama. This was criminal. And if Claire Sterling had uncovered this, it explained why she'd disappeared. Nathan closed the laptop, his heart pounding. He should tell Vivian, but something held him back. If he told her, she'd be in even more danger, and so would Chloe. And Ellie. Nathan stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning. He'd signed up to play a fake husband for a year. He hadn't signed up for this. But it was too late to back out now. Ichak. The next morning, Nathan found Vivian in her office. She looked up when he knocked, her expression guarded. "What is it?" Nathan stepped inside and closed the door. "We need to talk." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "About?" Nathan pulled the external drive from his pocket and set it on her desk. Vivian stared at it, her face going pale. "Where did you find that?" Hidden in the security gate, Nathan said. It's your sister's, isn't it? Vivian didn't answer. She just picked up the drive, her hands trembling slightly. I read the files, Nathan said quietly. I know what she found. Vivian's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have done that. Maybe not, Nathan said. But now I know why people are trying to destroy you. And why your sister disappeared. Vivian looked up at him, her eyes blazing. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't, Nathan shot back. I'm living in this house. My daughter is living in this house. If people are willing to make your sister disappear, what's to stop them from coming after Chloe? Or Ellie? Vivian's expression cracked just for a second. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that, Nathan said. Not alone. Vivian stared at him for a long moment, her walls slowly crumbling. Then she sank into her chair, looking more exhausted than Nathan had ever seen her. I don't know what to do, she admitted quietly. I've been trying to find evidence for months, trying to figure out who I can trust. But everyone around me could be involved. Nathan sat down across from her. Then we figure it out together. Vivian looked up, surprised. Why would you do that? Nathan exhaled slowly. Because you're paying me to protect your family. And whether I like it or not, I'm part of that family now. Vivian's eyes softened just slightly. And for the first time since they'd met, Nathan saw something other than ice behind her gaze. He saw fear and hope, and the beginning of something that might actually be real. Over the next 3 days, Nathan and Vivian became unlikely partners. They worked late into the night, piecing together Claire's encrypted files like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Vivian brought her business knowledge, her understanding of the company's inner workings. Nathan brought fresh eyes and a stubborn refusal to accept that anyone was untouchable. The picture that emerged was uglier than either of them had imagined. Sterling Dynamics had been funneling money through fake defense contracts for years. The contracts looked legitimate on paper. Government approvals, proper documentation, everything signed and sealed. But the actual work was never done. The equipment was never delivered. The money just disappeared into offshore accounts controlled by a network of shell companies. And Claire had figured it out. She was always too smart for her own good, Vivian said quietly, staring at one of Claire's handwritten notes. They were sitting in Vivian's office, the only light coming from the laptop screen and a single desk lamp. She worked in the legal department, had access to contracts that most people never saw. Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhausted. How long do you think this has been going on? Years, Vivian said. Maybe since before I became CEO. And your uncle's involved? Oh, Vivian's jaw tightened. Lawrence Sterling, my father's younger brother. He's been on the board since the company was founded. Nathan studied her face. You didn't know? I suspected, Vivian admitted, but I couldn't prove anything. And I couldn't accuse a board member, especially family, without evidence. Nathan looked back at the screen. Well, now you've got evidence. Looked. Not enough, Vivian said. Claire's notes point to corruption, but they don't prove who ordered her disappearance, or where she is now. Nathan's stomach twisted. You think she's still alive? Vivian's expression went blank, the same cold mask she wore in public. But Nathan had spent enough time with her now to recognize it for what it was, a wall she put up when the truth hurt too much to face. I don't know, Vivian said finally. The police declared her a missing person. No body, no evidence of foul play. Just gone. Nathan wanted to say something comforting, but he didn't know how. Comfort wasn't his strong suit, and Vivian didn't seem like the type to accept it anyway. Instead, he said, We keep digging. We find out who's at the top of this thing, and we figure out what happened to your sister. Vivian looked at him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do, Nathan said. Because if I don't, and something happens to Ellie or Chloe, I'll never forgive myself. Vivian held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. All right, but we do this carefully. If the wrong people find out we're investigating, they'll come after us. Nathan's hands tightened on the armrests. They already are. Vivian didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. The next morning, Nathan woke to the sound of shouting downstairs. He grabbed a shirt and bolted out of his room, his heart hammering. The voices were coming from the kitchen, one of them Vivian's, sharp and furious. Nathan took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the kitchen. Vivian stood near the island, her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale with rage. "You don't get to make that decision without consulting me, Richard." Nathan stopped in the doorway, catching his breath. Vivian's eyes flicked to him, and she held up a hand. "Wait. I don't care what the board wants," Vivian snapped into the phone. "I'm the CEO of this company, and I will not be pushed out by a group of investors who can't see past their own greed." There was a pause. Nathan could hear the faint murmur of a voice on the other end, calm, condescending. Vivian's grip on the phone tightened. "If you try to call a vote of no confidence, I will fight you every step of the way. And I will win. Yi shi yi." Another pause. Then Vivian's expression shifted, just slightly, and Nathan saw fear flash across her face. "Don't you dare bring Chloe into this," Vivian said, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "She has nothing to do with the company." Nathan's stomach dropped. Vivian ended the call and slammed the phone onto the counter. "What happened?" Nathan asked. Vivian didn't answer right away. She just stood there breathing hard, her hands shaking. "They're filing a petition," she said finally, "to have Chloe removed from my custody." Nathan's blood ran cold. "What?" "They're claiming I'm unfit," Vivian said, her voice tight. "That I'm too focused on the company to properly care for a traumatized child. That I'm using my marriage as a PR stunt to cover up my instability." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Can they do that?" "They can try," Vivian said. "And if they get a judge to agree, they'll take her away from me." "What?" Nathan's mind raced. "What about me? I'm her legal guardian too now, right? We're married." Vivian shook her head. "The contract doesn't make you her legal guardian. It just makes you my husband. And if they can prove the marriage is fake, they'll use it as ammunition against me." Nathan swore under his breath. "So what do we do?" Vivian looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked completely lost. "I don't know." Nathan crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her. "Then we figure it out, together." Vivian's eyes searched his face. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Doing what?" "Helping me," Vivian said. "You could walk away right now. Take the money you've already earned and leave. But you're not." Nathan exhaled slowly. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone. And I'm not going to stand by and let it happen to you." Vivian's expression softened, just for a second, before the walls went back up. But it was enough. That afternoon, Nathan found himself alone in the house with Chloe. Vivian had gone into the office for an emergency meeting with her lawyers. Ellie was at a doctor's appointment with one of Vivian's staff members. And Nathan, who had no idea how to take care of a silent, traumatized 6-year-old, was left to figure it out. Chloe sat on the living room floor drawing in her sketchbook like she always did. She hadn't looked up when Nathan walked in, hadn't acknowledged him at all. Nathan sat down on his couch, trying to think of something to say. "You're really good at that," he said finally, nodding toward the sketchbook. Chloe didn't respond. Nathan tried again. "What are you drawing?" Still nothing. Nathan sighed, leaning back. This was harder than fixing engines. Then Chloe stood up, walked over to him, and held out the sketchbook. Nathan took it carefully, surprised. The drawing was of a woman, dark hair, kind eyes, standing in front of a house that looked nothing like Vivian's mansion. The woman was smiling, holding a little girl's hand. Nathan's throat tightened. "Is this your mom?" Chloe nodded. Nathan studied the drawing, his chest aching. "She looks nice." Chloe nodded again, then pointed to the little girl in the picture. "That's you?" Nathan asked. Another nod. Nathan handed the sketchbook back gently. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I'm sorry she's not here." Chloe's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just took the sketchbook and sat back down, hugging it to her chest. Nathan didn't know what else to say, so he just sat there, keeping her company in the silence. A few minutes later, Chloe looked up at him. She didn't speak, but she scooted a little closer, leaning against the couch near his leg. It wasn't much, but it was something, and Nathan decided that was enough for now. When Vivian came home that night, she looked worse than Nathan had ever seen her. Her hair was falling out of its usual perfect style. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been fighting back tears for hours. Nathan met her in the hallway. "How'd it go?" Vivian didn't answer. She just walked past him, heading for the stairs. Nathan followed. "Vivian." She stopped, her back to him. "Talk to me," Nathan said. Vivian's shoulders sagged. "The petition is real. They're filing it tomorrow. And my lawyers think there's a good chance a judge will at least grant a temporary hearing." Nathan's stomach dropped. "Meaning?" "Meaning Chloe could be removed from my home while they investigate whether I'm fit to be her guardian," Vivian said, her voice hollow. Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "That's insane. That's the law," Vivian said bitterly, "and Richard Caldwell knows exactly how to use it against me." Nathan stepped closer. "Then we fight back. We show them you're a good guardian, that Chloe is safe here." Vivian turned to face him, and Nathan saw the raw fear in her eyes. "What if that's not enough?" Nathan didn't have an answer. Yes. Nathan didn't have, because he didn't know if it would be enough either. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, Nathan did everything he could to help Vivian build her case. He took photos of Chloe smiling with Ellie. He documented every meal, every bedtime routine, every moment that showed Chloe was cared for and safe. Vivian hired a child psychologist to evaluate Chloe's progress. The psychologist's report was cautiously optimistic. Chloe was improving, slowly opening up, showing signs of attachment to both Vivian and Ellie. But Nathan knew it might not be enough to convince a judge, especially when the people fighting Vivian had money, power, and no conscience. One night, Nathan found Vivian sitting on the floor of Chloe's room, watching the little girl sleep. Nathan leaned against the doorframe. "She's doing better, you know." Vivian didn't look up. "I'm terrified I'm going to lose her." Nathan walked over and sat down beside her. "You won't. You can't promise that." "Maybe not," Nathan admitted, "but I can promise I'll do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen." Vivian finally looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Why?" Nathan shrugged. "Because she deserves to be with someone who loves her, and whether you want to admit it or not, you love her." Vivian's breath hitched. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a mother." "Nobody does," Nathan said. "You just figure it out as you go." "Yeah." Vivian wiped her eyes quickly, like she was ashamed of the tears. "I can't afford to fail." "Then don't," Nathan said simply. They sat in silence for a while, watching Chloe sleep. Then Vivian said quietly, "Thank you." Nathan glanced at her. "For what?" "For not giving up on us." Nathan's chest tightened. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, he realized he meant it. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about protecting Ellie. Somewhere along the way, Vivian and Chloe had become people he actually cared about, and that terrified him more than anything else. The night before the hearing, Nathan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. The judge could side with Caldwell. Chloe could be taken away. Vivian could lose everything. And Nathan would be powerless to stop it. He got out of bed and went downstairs, hoping a drink of water might clear his head. When he reached the kitchen, he found Vivian already there. She was sitting at the island, staring at a glass of wine she hadn't touched. Nathan poured himself some water and sat down across from her. "Couldn't sleep either?" Vivian shook her head. They sat in silence for a while. Then Vivian said, "I've been thinking about what happens if I lose tomorrow." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're not going to lose." "But if I do," Vivian pressed, "if they take Chloe away—" "They won't," Nathan interrupted. Vivian looked at him, her eyes filled with a vulnerability he'd never seen before. "And if they do? What happens to her? She gets placed with some distant relative she doesn't know, or worse, into the system?" Nathan's hands clenched around the glass. "That's not going to happen." "You can't know that." "Maybe not," Nathan said. "But I know you're not going to give up without a fight, and neither am I." Vivian's expression cracked, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Nathan reached across the island and took her hand. Vivian stared at their joined hands, her breath shaky. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be vulnerable, how to let people in. You're doing it right now, Nathan said quietly. Vivian looked up at him, and for the first time, Nathan saw past all the walls, all the armor. He saw a woman who was scared, exhausted, and trying desperately to hold everything together. And he realized that somewhere along the way, he'd started to care about her too. Not because of the contract, not because of the money, but because underneath the Ice Queen persona, Vivian Sterling was human, and she was worth fighting for. Ikak. The hearing took place in a cold, sterile courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale air. Nathan sat beside Vivian, dressed in the same suit he'd worn to the board meeting. Vivian looked flawless, as always, perfectly composed, perfectly controlled. But Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the armrest just a little too tight. Across the aisle sat Richard Caldwell and his team of lawyers, looking smug and confident. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who seemed entirely unimpressed by everyone in the room. Caldwell's lawyer went first, painting a picture of Vivian as a workaholic CEO who was too focused on her company to properly care for a traumatized child. He presented evidence of late-night board meetings, missed school events, and the sudden marriage to Nathan, which he heavily implied was a sham designed to improve Vivian's public image. Nathan's blood boiled with every word. Then it was Vivian's lawyer's turn. He presented the psychologist's report, photos of Chloe smiling and playing with Ellie, testimony from Chloe's teachers about her improvement at school. He called Nathan to the stand as a character witness. Nathan answered every question honestly, describing how Chloe had slowly started to open up, how she laughed more now, how she seemed happier. Caldwell's lawyer tried to poke holes in Nathan's testimony, suggesting that he was only saying what Vivian had paid him to say. Nathan's jaw clenched. I'm not being paid to lie. I'm telling you what I've seen with my own eyes. Chloe is safe. She's cared for. And she's loved. The lawyer smirked. And yet you've only been married to Ms. Sterling for a few weeks. Hardly enough time to truly understand a child's needs. Nathan leaned forward. I've been a single father for 5 years. I know what it's like to raise a kid on your own. And I know what it looks like when a child is thriving. Chloe is thriving. The lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but the judge cut him off. I think I've heard enough, she said. Nathan's heart stopped. The judge looked at Vivian. Ms. Sterling, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Vivian stood. Of course, Your Honor. Do you love this child? The courtroom went silent. Vivian's composure cracked, just for a second, and Nathan saw the emotion flood her face. Yes, Vivian said, her voice breaking. I love her more than anything. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to Caldwell's lawyer. I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, and while I understand the concerns raised about Ms. Sterling's work schedule, I see no evidence that the child is being neglected or harmed. Caldwell's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the judge held up a hand. I'm not finished. The child's psychologist has reported significant improvement in her emotional state since moving in with Ms. Sterling. Her teachers report the same. And from what I can see, she has a stable home environment with 2 parental figures who are actively involved in her care. Nathan's chest tightened with hope. The judge looked at Vivian. I'm denying the petition for removal. Chloe will remain in your custody. Vivian's knees nearly buckled. Nathan reached out and steadied her, his hand on her arm. The judge wasn't done. However, I am ordering a follow-up evaluation in 6 months. If there are any signs of neglect or instability at that time, we will revisit this matter. Vivian nodded quickly. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. The judge banged her gavel, and the hearing was over. Nathan and Vivian walked out of the courtroom together, and the moment they were in the hallway, Vivian turned to him. We won, she whispered, like she couldn't quite believe it. Nathan smiled. Yeah, we did. And then, without thinking, Vivian stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Nathan froze, surprised, but then he hugged her back, feeling the tension drain out of her body as she finally let herself believe it was over. For now, at least. That night, Nathan found Vivian sitting in Chloe's room again, watching her sleep. But this time, she was smiling. Nathan leaned against the doorframe. You okay? Vivian looked up at him. I'm better than okay. Nathan walked over and sat down beside her. You did good today. Vivian shook her head. We did good. I couldn't have won without you. Nathan shrugged. I just told the truth. Vivian's smile softened. You've been doing a lot more than that. Nathan didn't know how to respond to that, so he just sat there, watching Chloe sleep beside her. After a while, Vivian said, I've been thinking. About what happens when the year is up, Vivian said quietly. When the contract ends. Nathan's stomach twisted. What about it? Vivian looked at him, her eyes searching his face. I don't want you to leave. Nathan's breath caught. I know that was the deal, Vivian said quickly. 1 year, then you go back to your life. But things have changed. Chloe's attached to you, and Ellie, and I... She stopped, like she didn't know how to finish the sentence. Nathan's heart pounded. And you what? Vivian exhaled slowly. I don't know. I just know that I don't want this to end. Nathan stared at her, his mind racing. He'd spent weeks telling himself this was temporary, that it was just a job, that when the year was up, he'd take the money and go back to his old life. But sitting here now, looking at Vivian's vulnerable expression and the little girl sleeping peacefully beside them, Nathan realized something. He didn't want it to end either. Then maybe it doesn't have to, he said quietly. Vivian's eyes widened. What? Nathan met her gaze. Maybe we don't end it. Maybe we just keep going. See what happens. Vivian's breath hitched. You'd do that? I'm already doing it, Nathan said. I'm here. I'm helping you raise Chloe. I'm trying to keep your company from imploding. He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. Vivian leaned closer. You're what? Nathan swallowed hard. I'm starting to care about you, and I don't know what to do about that. Vivian's expression softened, and she reached out, taking his hand. Maybe you don't have to do anything. Maybe you just let it happen. Nathan looked down at their joined hands, his heart racing. This was dangerous territory. He knew that. But for the first time in years, Nathan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The next few weeks were different. The house felt warmer somehow. Vivian started coming home earlier, joining Nathan and the girls for dinner. Chloe laughed more, talked more. Actual words now, small and hesitant, but real. Ellie thrived, her health improving after the surgery, her smile brighter than Nathan had seen in years. And Nathan and Vivian, they fell into a rhythm. It started with small things. Vivian asking Nathan's opinion on business decisions, Nathan making coffee for her in the morning without being asked. Late-night conversations in the kitchen that stretched past midnight. Then one night, Vivian kissed him. It happened so suddenly that Nathan almost didn't realize it was happening. They were standing in the kitchen, talking about nothing important, and Vivian just leaned in and pressed her lips to his. Nathan froze for half a second. Then he kissed her back. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian looked terrified. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have... Nathan cut her off by kissing her again. This time, Vivian didn't pull away. And when they finally broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his heart pounding. This is complicated, he said. Vivian laughed softly. Everything about this is complicated. Nathan smiled. Yeah, but I think I'm okay with that. Vivian looked up at him, her eyes filled with something Nathan couldn't quite name. Hope? Maybe? Or trust? Or something that looked a lot like love? But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, the other shoe dropped. Nathan was working in their garage late one night when his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. He opened it, frowning. The message was simple. You should ask your wife what really happened to her sister. Nathan's blood ran cold. He stared at the message, his mind racing. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Nathan's hand shook as he opened it. The image showed Claire Sterling, alive, but barely. She was sitting in what looked like a basement, her hands bound, her face bruised, and in the background, just barely visible, was a logo, Sterling Dynamics. Nathan's heart stopped. He grabbed his keys and ran. Nathan drove faster than he should have, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. The photo burned in his mind. Claire Sterling, alive but imprisoned, somewhere inside a Sterling Dynamics facility. He should have gone to the police. He knew that. But the logo in that photo meant whoever was holding Claire had access to company property, company resources. That meant someone high up, someone powerful enough to make evidence disappear. Someone who might be sitting in Vivian's living room right now, drinking her coffee and pretending to be her ally. Nathan pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, his heart hammering. The house was dark except for a single light in Vivian's office. He found her exactly where he expected, sitting at her desk, staring at her laptop, a cup of cold tea forgotten beside her. She looked up when he burst through the door, startled. "Nathan, what's wrong?" Nathan pulled out his phone and showed her the photo. Vivian's face went white. She stood so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Where did you get this?" "Someone texted it to me," Nathan said. "Anonymous number." Vivian grabbed the phone, her hands shaking as she stared at the image. "This is recent. Look at her. She's thinner than she was 6 months ago, and that bruise on her cheek is fresh." Nathan's jaw clenched. "She's alive, Vivian. Your sister is alive." Vivian's breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Where is she? Did they say anything else?" Nathan shook his head. "Just that one message, asking what really happened to her." Vivian looked up at him, confusion and fear warring in her eyes. "What does that mean?" Nathan didn't know, but the implication was clear. Someone wanted him to doubt Vivian, to question what she knew, to drive a wedge between them right when they were starting to trust each other. "Do you recognize the room?" Nathan asked, pointing at the background of the photo. Vivian zoomed in, studying the details. "It's industrial, concrete walls, exposed pipes. Could be any basement in any Sterling facility." "How many facilities are there?" 12 in the state alone, Vivian said, her voice hollow. "Warehouses, manufacturing plants, research labs. It could be any of them." All? Nathan's mind raced. "Then we narrow it down. Which ones are connected to the people Claire was investigating?" Vivian pulled up a map on her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard. On her. Claire's notes mentioned 3 locations specifically. One's a warehouse outside Blackridge. Another's a manufacturing plant in Millbrook. The third is a research facility near the Canadian border. Nathan studied the map. "The warehouse is closest, 20 minutes from here." Vivian's expression hardened. "It's been abandoned for 2 years. The company shut it down after a safety violation." "Perfect place to hide someone, Nathan said. Vivian grabbed her coat. "I'm coming with you." "Like hell you are," Nathan said. "If this is a trap, then I need to be there." Vivian interrupted. "That's my sister Nathan. I'm not sitting here while you risk your life to find her." Nathan wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to back down. "Fine," he said. "But we're not going in blind. We call the police. Tell them what we know." "No," Vivian said sharply. Nathan stared at her. "What?" "We can't trust the police," Vivian said. "If someone inside Sterling Dynamics has been hiding Claire for 6 months, they've got resources, money, connections. For all we know, they've got cops on their payroll." Nathan's stomach turned. "You really think it goes that deep?" Vivian met his gaze. "I don't know, but I'm not willing to risk Claire's life to find out." Nathan exhaled slowly. She had a point. "All right, we go alone. But we're careful. And if things go sideways, we get out and call for backup." Vivian nodded. "Agreed." They were halfway to the door when Nathan stopped. "Wait, the girls." Vivian's expression softened. "They're asleep, and the security team is here. They'll be safe." Nathan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to protect Ellie and Chloe. But if Claire was really in that warehouse, she was running out of time. "Let's go," he said finally. They left the house together, stepping into the cold night air. But the drive to the warehouse felt like it took hours, even though it was barely 20 minutes. Nathan kept checking his mirrors, watching for headlights that might be following them. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, silent and tense. her phone clutched in her hand. The warehouse sat at the edge of an industrial zone, surrounded by chain-link fencing and overgrown weeds. The building itself was massive, 3 stories of rusted metal and broken windows, dark and foreboding against the night sky. Nathan parked a block away, killing the headlights. "There," Vivian said, pointing. A single black SUV was parked near the rear entrance. Nathan's pulse quickened. "Someone's here." They got out of the car and approached on foot, staying low and quiet. The fence had a gap near the back corner, probably cut by vandals or squatters. Nathan slipped through first, then helped Vivian. The warehouse loomed above them, silent and menacing. Nathan pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, keeping it low. "Stay close." They found a side door hanging off its hinges and slipped inside. The interior was worse than Nathan had imagined. Collapsed shelving, broken glass, graffiti covering every surface. The air smelled like rust and mold, and something else Nathan couldn't identify. Something wrong. Vivian grabbed his arm. "Listen." Nathan froze. Faint voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Nathan turned off his flashlight and let his eyes adjust to the darkness. Vivian did the same. Together they moved toward the voices, stepping carefully over debris. The voices grew louder as they descended a metal staircase into the basement level. Nathan's heart pounded so hard he thought it might give them away. At the bottom of the stairs, a dim light spilled from a doorway at the end of a long corridor. Nathan pressed himself against the wall and edged closer, Vivian right behind him. The voices became clear. "Doesn't matter what she knows. She's not getting out of here." Nathan's blood ran cold. He risked a glance around the corner. The room was exactly like the photo. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, a single flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. And there, sitting in a metal chair with her hands bound behind her back, was Claire Sterling. She looked terrible. Thin, pale, her dark hair tangled and dirty. But she was alive. Standing in front of her was a man Nathan didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. And beside him, looking calm and completely unbothered, was Lawrence Sterling, Vivian's uncle. Nathan felt Vivian tense beside him, her breath catching. Lawrence was talking, his voice smooth and conversational, like he was discussing the weather instead of holding his own niece prisoner. "You should have stayed quiet, Claire," Lawrence said. "You always were too curious for your own good." Claire's voice was hoarse, strained. "You're stealing from the company, laundering money through fake contracts." "I had to say something." "And look where that got you," Lawrence said coldly. 6 months in a basement, while your sister runs around playing CEO. "Vivian knows," Claire said. "She's going to find out what you did, and when she does, Lawrence laughed. "Vivian doesn't know anything, and even if she did, she won't be CEO much longer. The board's already turning against her. Another few weeks, and she'll be voted out." "And then what?" Claire asked. "You take over? Run the company into the ground while you pocket millions?" Lawrence's expression hardened. "I built that company with my brother. I deserve more than the scraps Vivian's been throwing me." "You deserve prison," Claire spat. Lawrence's hand shot out and struck her across the face. Nathan's vision went red. He was moving before he could think, charging into the room. "Nathan, no!" Vivian's whisper came too late. Nathan slammed into Lawrence, driving him into the wall. The older man grunted in surprise, trying to push Nathan off. The other man in the room, the one Nathan didn't recognize, went for his jacket, reaching for something inside. A gun. Vivian screamed, "Nathan, watch out!" Nathan spun just in time to see the man pull out a pistol, but before he could aim it, Vivian threw herself at him, knocking his arm aside. The gun went off, deafeningly loud in the confined space. The bullet hit the ceiling, raining down chunks of concrete. Nathan drove his fist into Lawrence's gut, then shoved him toward the corner. Lawrence stumbled, gasping for air. Vivian struggled with the armed man, trying to wrestle the gun away from him. He was bigger, stronger, and he threw her off easily. Nathan grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and swung it hard, connecting with the man's shoulder. The man howled in pain, dropping the gun. Nathan kicked it away, sending it skittering across the concrete. Lawrence was back on his feet now, his face twisted with rage. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Carter." Nathan raised the pipe. "Try me." Behind them, Vivian was untying Claire, her hands shaking. "Can you walk?" Vivian asked. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. Viv, save it, Vivian said. We're getting you out of here. The armed man lunged at Nathan, tackling him to the ground. The pipe clattered away. They wrestled on the filthy floor, trading blows. Nathan managed to get on top, pinning the man down. Vivian, go! Vivian hesitated, torn between helping her sister and helping Nathan. Go! Nathan shouted again. Vivian grabbed Claire and dragged her toward the door. Lawrence moved to block their path. But Claire, weak as she was, drove her elbow into his stomach with surprising force. Lawrence doubled over, and the sisters pushed past him. Nathan scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. The armed man was getting up too, reaching for the gun. Nathan didn't give him the chance. He grabbed the metal pipe again and swung it at the man's legs, sweeping them out from under him. Then Nathan ran. He caught up with Vivian and Claire in the corridor, and together they bolted up the stairs. Behind them, Lawrence was shouting, his voice echoing through the warehouse. You can't run. I'll find you. I'll destroy everything you care about. They burst out of the side door and sprinted toward the fence. Claire stumbled, her legs giving out. Nathan caught her, lifting her up. I've got you. They made it through the gap in the fence just as headlights flooded the area behind them. More cars. More people. Move! Nathan shouted. They reached Nathan's truck, and he practically threw Claire into the back seat. Vivian jumped in beside her, and Nathan gunned the engine. The truck roared to life, tires screeching as Nathan floored it. In the rearview mirror, he saw figures emerging from the warehouse, shouting and pointing, but they were too late. Nathan drove like a man possessed, weaving through dark streets until he was certain they weren't being followed. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. In the back seat, Vivian was holding Claire, both of them crying. You're alive, Vivian kept saying. You're alive! Claire clung to her sister, sobbing. I thought I was going to die in there. Nathan's hand shook on the steering wheel. You're safe now. But even as he said it, Nathan knew it wasn't true. Lawrence Sterling was still out there, and now he knew they were coming for him. Nathan drove straight to the hospital. Claire needed medical attention, dehydration, malnutrition, possible broken ribs. The doctors admitted her immediately, and Vivian refused to leave her side. Nathan stayed in the waiting room, his mind racing. He needed to call the police, tell them everything, but Vivian's warning echoed in his head. What if Lawrence had cops on his payroll? What if reporting this made things worse? Nathan pulled out his phone and called the one person he thought he could trust. His old friend Marcus, a former Marine who now worked private security. Marcus answered on the third ring. Nathan, it's 3 a.m. I need help, Nathan said. Big help. Marcus's tone shifted immediately. What kind of help? Nathan explained everything. The contract marriage, the corruption, the warehouse, Claire. When he finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You're in over your head. I know, Nathan said. That's why I'm calling you. Marcus sighed. All right, I'll make some calls. See if I can find someone in law enforcement we can actually trust. But Nathan, you need to be careful. People like Lawrence Sterling don't go down easy. I know, Nathan said again. And if this goes sideways, you could lose everything, Marcus warned. Nathan looked toward the emergency room where Vivian was sitting beside her sister's hospital bed. I've already got everything that matters. Marcus was quiet. Then he said, I'll call you back in an hour. The line went dead. Nathan leaned back in the uncomfortable plastic chair and closed his eyes. He thought about Ellie, safe at home with Chloe and the security team. He thought about Vivian, finally reunited with her sister after 6 months of hell. And he thought about Lawrence Sterling, who was probably already planning his next move. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. An hour later, Marcus called back. I found someone, he said. FBI agent. Specializes in corporate fraud and white-collar crime. She's clean. No connections to Sterling Dynamics. No reason to be on anyone's payroll. Nathan exhaled in relief. Can we trust her? As much as you can trust anyone, Marcus said. Her name's Agent Sarah Reeves. I told her the basics. She wants to meet with you and Vivian tomorrow morning. Where? Neutral location, a diner outside Millbrook. 8 a.m. Nathan glanced at the clock. It was almost 4 a.m. We'll be there. Nathan, Marcus said, his voice serious. Watch your back. If Lawrence knows you pulled Claire out of that warehouse, he's going to come after you. Let him try, Nathan said. Marcus snorted. You always were stubborn. Nathan smiled grimly. It's kept me alive this long. They hung up and Nathan went to find Vivian. She was still in Claire's room, holding her sister's hand while Claire slept. The doctors had given Claire something for the pain, and she looked peaceful for the first time in months. Vivian looked up when Nathan walked in. Her eyes were red, her face exhausted. Is she going to be okay? Nathan nodded. Doctors say she'll recover. It'll take time, but she's strong. Vivian's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you for everything. Nathan sat down beside her. I called a friend. He found us an FBI agent we can trust. We're meeting her tomorrow morning. Vivian's expression hardened. Good. I want Lawrence arrested. I want everyone involved in this locked up. They will be, Nathan promised. But we need to be smart about this. Lawrence has resources. If we move too fast, I don't care, Vivian interrupted. He held my sister captive for 6 months. He tried to destroy my company. He threatened my family. I want him to pay. Nathan understood the rage in her voice. He felt it too. He will. But we do this the right way. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, we do it your way. Nathan squeezed her hand. Get some rest. I'll stay here and keep watch. Vivian shook her head. I'm not leaving Claire. Then I'm not leaving you, Nathan said simply. Vivian's eyes softened. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Nathan allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it through this. Morning came too fast. Nathan and Vivian left the hospital just before 7, leaving Claire in the care of nurses and a private security guard Marcus had sent over. They drove to the diner in silence, both of them exhausted and running on adrenaline. Agent Sarah Reeves was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a no-nonsense expression. She was younger than Nathan expected. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like someone who didn't miss details. Miss Sterling, Mr. Carter, she said as they slid into the booth across from her. Marcus filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear it from you. Vivian took a breath and started talking. She told Agent Reeves everything. The fake contracts, the money laundering, Claire's investigation, her disappearance, the custody battle, the warehouse. She laid it all out, clear and methodical. When she finished, Reeves was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, You have evidence? Vivian pulled out a flash drive and set it on the table. Claire's files, financial records, emails, everything she compiled before she disappeared. Bekan. Reeves picked up the drive, studying it. And you're certain Lawrence Sterling is involved? He admitted it, Nathan said. Last night. We heard him. Reeves looked at him. You witnessed a confession? We both did, Vivian said. Reeves leaned back, considering. That's good, but it's not enough for an arrest. We need physical evidence tying him to the warehouse, security footage, financial transactions, something concrete. Nathan's jaw clenched. So what do we do? Reeves met his gaze. You let me do my job. I'll start an investigation, pull records, interview witnesses, build a case. How long will that take? Vivian asked. Weeks, Reeves said. Maybe months. Vivian's hands tightened on the table. We don't have months. Lawrence knows we found Claire. He's going to move against us. Then you need to be careful, Reeves said. Stay visible. Stay safe. Don't give him an opening. Nathan shook his head. That's not good enough. Reeves's expression hardened. It's the law, Mr. Carter. I can't arrest someone without evidence. And right now, all I have is your word. Nathan wanted to argue, but Vivian put a hand on his arm. She's right. Nathan looked at her, frustrated. Vivian turned to Reeves. We'll cooperate fully, whatever you need. Reeves nodded. Good, I'll be in touch. She stood, tucking the flash drive into her jacket. And Miss Sterling, watch your back. Men like Lawrence Sterling don't go quietly. Then she left. Nathan and Vivian sat in the booth, staring at their untouched coffee. "We just handed her everything," Nathan said. "And she told us to wait." Vivian's expression was grim. "Because that's how the system works." Nathan's frustration boiled over. "The system's broken. Lawrence is out there right now, planning his next move. And we're supposed to just sit around and hope the FBI moves fast enough?" Vivian looked at him. "What else can we do?" Nathan didn't have an answer. Nathan didn't have one. But he knew one thing for certain. If they just waited, Lawrence was going to strike first. And someone Nathan cared about was going to get hurt. That afternoon, Nathan returned to the house to check on Ellie and Chloe. The girls were in the living room playing some kind of board game. They looked happy, safe, completely unaware of the chaos swirling around them. Nathan stood in the doorway, watching them. Ellie noticed him first. "Dad, you're back!" She jumped up and ran over, throwing her arms around him. Nathan hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Hey, kiddo." "Where's Vivian?" Ellie asked. "Still at the hospital," Nathan said. "She'll be home later." Ellie pulled back, studying his face. "Are you okay?" Nathan forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." Ellie didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. "Chloe and I made lunch. There's leftovers if you're hungry." Nathan's chest tightened. His 8-year-old daughter was taking care of things while he was out fighting corporate criminals. "Thanks, Elle," he said quietly. Ellie grinned and ran back to Chloe. Nathan watched them for another moment, then went upstairs to shower and change. He was exhausted, his body aching from the fight in the warehouse, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Lawrence was still out there, and Nathan had no idea what he was planning. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus again. "You get the security guard to the hospital?" Nathan asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Armed, trained. Nobody's getting to Claire without going through him first." "Bam." "Good," Nathan said. "What about the house?" "I've got 2 guys watching the perimeter," Marcus said. "And I'm pulling in a couple more tonight. You've got eyes on every entrance." Nathan exhaled slowly. "Thanks, man." "Don't thank me yet," Marcus said. "This is just the beginning. Lawrence is going to retaliate, and when he does, it's going to get ugly." Nathan knew he was right, but he didn't know how ugly it would get. Not yet. Bullshits. That night, Vivian came home looking more exhausted than Nathan had ever seen her. She collapsed onto the couch beside him, leaning her head back and closing her eyes. "How's Claire?" Nathan asked. "Better," Vivian said. "Physically, at least. Mentally." She trailed off. Nathan didn't push. They sat in silence for a while. Then Vivian said, "I keep thinking about what Lawrence said, that the board's turning against me, that I'll be voted out." Nathan looked at her. "Do you think he's right?" Vivian opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know. I've been so focused on finding Claire, I haven't paid attention to what's happening at the company." "Then pay attention now," Nathan said. "Find out who's loyal, who's compromised, who you can trust." Vivian turned to look at him. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," Nathan admitted, "but it's necessary." Vivian studied his face. "How did you get so good at this?" Nathan smiled grimly. "I spent 5 years keeping a failing business alive while raising a sick kid on my own. You learn to fight when your back's against the wall." Vivian's expression softened. "You're stronger than you think." Nathan shook his head. "I'm just stubborn." Vivian laughed, a real laugh, the first Nathan had heard in days. That too. They fell into silence again, but this time it felt different, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Then Vivian's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, frowning at the screen. Her expression went pale. "What is it?" Nathan asked. Vivian handed him the phone without a word. It was a news alert. The headline read, "Sterling Dynamics CEO's secret marriage contract exposed. Fraud allegations surface." Nathan's stomach dropped. He opened the article. It was worse than he'd imagined. Someone had leaked the contract, the entire thing, including the financial terms, the custody arrangement, everything. The article painted Vivian as a manipulative CEO who'd bought a fake husband to deceive the courts and investors. It accused Nathan of being a gold digger. It questioned Vivian's fitness as a guardian, and it mentioned Ellie and Chloe by name. Nathan's hands shook with rage. Lawrence did this. Vivian's face was blank, emotionless. Of course he did. Nathan stood, pacing. He's trying to destroy your reputation, make it impossible for you to fight back. It's working, Vivian said quietly. By tomorrow morning, every major outlet will have picked this up. My lawyers will be flooded with calls. The board will demand my resignation. Nathan stopped pacing. Then we fight back. We tell them the truth. Vivian looked at him like he'd lost his mind. What truth? That the marriage was fake, but now it's real? That'll make things better? Nathan's jaw clenched. I don't know. But we can't just let him win. Vivian stood, her eyes blazing. He's already won, Nathan. Don't you see? The moment that article went live, everything we've built, everything we fought for, it's over. No, Nathan said firmly. It's not over, not unless we let it be. Vivian stared at him, and for a moment, Nathan thought she might break down completely. But then her expression hardened, and the Ice Queen was back. Fine, she said. We fight, but we do it smart, and we don't make any more mistakes. Nathan nodded. Agreed. Vivian's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. The world was waking up to the scandal, and the storm was only just beginning. Nathan's world stopped. He stood in the doorway of Ellie's empty room, his heart hammering so hard it felt like it might explode out of his chest. The blankets were thrown back. Her stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had since she was 2, lay on the floor like it had been dropped in a hurry. Vivian appeared behind him. What's wrong? Nathan couldn't speak. He just showed her the text. Vivian's face went white. When did this happen? How did they... Nathan was already running down the hall, checking every room. Chloe, where are you? He found her in her own bedroom, curled up under her blankets, fast asleep and safe. Relief flooded through him for half a second before the terror came rushing back. They'd only taken Ellie. Vivian burst into the room. Chloe's here? Nathan nodded, his hands shaking. They only took Ellie. Vivian grabbed his arm. Nathan, you can't go to that warehouse. It's a trap. I don't care, Nathan said, his voice raw. That's my daughter. And if you walk in there alone, they'll kill you both, Vivian said desperately. We need to call the police. Call Agent Reeves. Call someone. Nathan pulled away from her. There's no time. The text says I have 1 hour. By the time the police get there, but... Nathan, please, Vivian begged. Don't do this. Nathan looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stop talking. Pure, unfiltered rage. They took my daughter, Nathan said quietly, each word hard as stone. And I'm going to get her back. He turned and walked out of the room. Vivian followed him down the stairs. Then I'm coming with you. No, Nathan said. You stay here with Chloe. If something happens to me, she's going to need you. Vivian grabbed his arm again, forcing him to stop. You're not going alone. Nathan looked at her. Vivian, I lost Claire for 6 months because I wasn't there to protect her, Vivian said, her voice shaking. I'm not losing you too. Nathan wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. He didn't have time to fight her on this. Fine, he said. But we wake up Marcus's guys, tell them to watch Chloe, and we call Reeves on the way. Vivian nodded and pulled out her phone. 5 minutes later, the security team was on high alert. Chloe was being watched by 2 armed guards, and Nathan and Vivian were in his truck, racing toward the warehouse. Vivian had Agent Reeves on speakerphone. Do not go in there, Reeves said firmly. I'm calling in local PD right now. They'll have units there in 15 minutes. That's too long, Nathan said, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Mr. Carter, if you go in there without backup, you're going to get yourself and your daughter killed, Reeves said. Lawrence Sterling is desperate. Desperate people do stupid, violent things. I don't care, Nathan said. That's my kid. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then she said, All right, I'm sending units now, but promise me you'll wait for backup before you go inside. Nathan didn't answer. Mr. Carter, Nathan ended the call. Vivian stared at him. You're not going to wait, are you? Would you? Nathan asked. Vivian looked away. She wouldn't, and they both knew it. The warehouse appeared in the distance, dark and foreboding against the night sky. The same warehouse where they'd found Claire just days ago. Nathan parked a block away and killed the lights. He and Vivian sat in the truck for a moment. both of them trying to steady their breathing. "We don't know how many people are in there," Vivian said quietly. "We don't know if they're armed." "I know," Nathan said. "This could go very badly." Nathan looked at her. "I know that too." Vivian reached over and took his hand. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." Nathan squeezed her hand, then let go and opened the truck door. They approached the warehouse on foot, moving quietly through the shadows. Nathan's eyes scanned every dark corner, every broken window, looking for movement. The same black SUV from before was parked near the rear entrance. Nathan's jaw clenched. Lawrence was here. He and Vivian slipped through the gap in the fence and made their way to the side door. Nathan paused, listening. Voices echoed from inside, faint but audible. One of them was Ellie. Nathan's heart lurched. She was crying. He looked at Vivian. She nodded. Nathan eased the door open, and they slipped inside. The warehouse was just as dark and decrepit as before, but this time Nathan knew exactly where he was going. He led Vivian toward the basement stairs, moving as quietly as possible. The voices grew louder as they descended. Nathan recognized Lawrence's smooth, condescending tone first. Then he heard Ellie. "I want my dad. Please, I want my dad." Something inside Nathan cracked. He reached the bottom of the stairs and peered around the corner. The scene was almost identical to when they'd found Claire. Same room, same flickering light bulb. But this time, it was Ellie sitting in the metal chair, her hands zip-tied behind her back, tears streaming down her face. Lawrence stood in front of her, looking irritated. Beside him was the same armed man from before, and two others Nathan didn't recognize. 3 armed men, 1 desperate girl, and Nathan had no weapon. Vivian touched his arm, her eyes wide with fear. Nathan knew this was suicide. He knew the smart thing to do was wait for the police, but he also knew his daughter was terrified and crying for him, and that was all that mattered. Nathan stepped out from behind the corner. "Let her go, Lawrence!" All 4 men spun toward him, hands going to their weapons. Lawrence's expression shifted from surprise to cold satisfaction. "Mr. Carter, right on time, though I see you didn't come alone." Vivian stepped out beside Nathan, her chin raised defiantly. Lawrence smiled. "Even better. Now I can deal with both of you at once." Ellie's eyes went wide when she saw Nathan. "Dad!" Nathan's heart broke at the terror in her voice. "It's okay, baby. I'm here." "How touching," Lawrence said dryly. The devoted father rushing in to save his little girl. "Too bad it's going to get you both killed." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "You're insane. The FBI is already investigating you. Kidnapping a child is only going to make things worse." Lawrence laughed. "The FBI has nothing. A few encrypted files and the word of a traumatized woman who spent 6 months in a basement. That's not evidence. That's a tragic story." "We have the emails," Vivian said, her voice steady despite the fear Nathan could see in her eyes. "The ones between you and Caldwell. Proof that you've been planning this takeover for over a year." Lawrence's smile didn't waver. "And where exactly are those emails now? On a laptop that's conveniently in FBI custody? By the time they get a warrant to use that evidence, I'll have already cleaned up this mess and disappeared." Nathan took a step forward. "You're not disappearing. You're going to prison." One of the armed men raised his gun, pointing it directly at Nathan's chest. Nathan froze. Lawrence held up a hand. "Not yet. Let's hear what Mr. Carter has to say first. After all, he came all this way." Nathan's mind raced, searching for any way out of this. "What do you want, Lawrence?" "What I've always wanted," Lawrence said. "Control of Sterling Dynamics. My brother built that company, and I helped him every step of the way. Then he died and left everything to Vivian, who was barely out of college. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Watching a child take over the empire I helped create?" "So this is about jealousy?" Vivian said, her voice sharp. "You've destroyed lives because you couldn't handle the fact that my father trusted me more than you?" Bullshit. Lawrence's expression darkened. "He didn't trust you more. He pitied you. You were his daughter. He felt obligated to give you something. But you were never supposed to actually run the company. You were supposed to be a figurehead while the real leaders, people like me, made the decisions." "Except I didn't need you, Vivian said. I built Sterling Dynamics into something bigger than you or my father ever imagined. And that's what you can't stand. That I succeeded without you. Lawrence's jaw tightened. You succeeded because I allowed it. But you got too comfortable, too confident. And when Claire started digging into the defense contracts, you became a liability. Nathan's blood boiled. So you had her kidnapped, locked her in a basement for 6 months. I did what was necessary, Lawrence said coldly. Claire wouldn't listen to reason. She was going to expose the entire operation. I gave her a choice. Stay quiet and live, or keep talking and disappear. She chose poorly. Vivian's voice shook with rage. She's your niece. She's a problem that needed to be solved, Lawrence said. Just like you. Just like your fake husband here. And just like this unfortunate little girl. Nathan's vision went red. Don't you touch her. Lawrence smiled. Or what? You'll stop me? You're unarmed, outnumbered, and completely out of your depth. The only reason you're still breathing is because I want you to understand exactly how badly you've lost before I kill you. Nathan's mind raced. He needed to buy time. Nathan's mind. The police had to be close by now. You think killing us is going to solve your problems? Nathan asked. Agent Reeves already has the evidence. Killing us just adds 3 more murders to the list. 4, Lawrence corrected, glancing at Ellie. And by the time anyone finds your bodies, I'll be in a country with no extradition treaty. Caldwell will run the company. And Claire will spend the rest of her life in a psychiatric facility, too traumatized to testify against anyone. Nathan's hands trembled with rage. You're a monster. I'm a businessman, Lawrence said. And right now, you and your family are bad for business. He nodded to the armed man pointing the gun at Nathan. Kill them. All 3 of them. Make it look like Carter went crazy, and a loud crash echoed from somewhere above them. Everyone froze. Then a voice boomed through the warehouse. FBI, drop your weapons. Lawrence's face went pale. The basement erupted into chaos. One of the armed men spun toward the staircase and fired. The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. Nathan didn't think. He just moved. He charged at the man holding the gun on him, tackling him to the ground before he could fire. They hit the concrete hard and the gun skittered away. Vivian lunged for Ellie, trying to pull her out of the chair. Another gunshot. Someone screamed. Nathan and the gunman wrestled on the floor, fists flying. The man was bigger, stronger, but Nathan fought like a man with nothing to lose. He managed to get on top, driving his fist into the man's face once, twice, until the man stopped moving. Nathan scrambled to his feet, breathing hard, and looked around. One of the other gunmen was down, clutching his shoulder and bleeding. The third had his hands up, surrendering as FBI agents swarmed down the stairs. And Lawrence was running. He bolted toward a back exit Nathan hadn't noticed before, disappearing into the shadows. Nathan's instinct was to chase him, but then he heard Ellie sobbing. He ran to her instead. Vivian had gotten the zip ties off, and Ellie threw herself into Nathan's arms the moment he reached her. Dad, I was so scared, she sobbed into his shoulder. Nathan held her tight, his whole body shaking. I know, baby, I know, but you're safe now. You're safe. Agent Reeves appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. Clear. More agents flooded the room, securing the scene. Reeves approached Nathan. Lawrence Sterling? Nathan pointed toward the back exit. He ran. Reeves barked orders into her radio, and agents took off in pursuit. Nathan didn't care. All he cared about was the little girl in his arms, alive and safe. Vivian knelt beside them, her hand on Ellie's back. Are you hurt? Ellie shook her head, still crying. Vivian looked at Nathan, and the relief in her eyes mirrored his own. They'd made it. Barely, but they'd made it. An agent approached. We need to get statements from all of you, and the girl needs to be checked by paramedics. Nathan nodded, but didn't let go of Ellie. Reeves crouched down beside them. You're lucky I got here when I did. Another 5 minutes, and this would have been a murder scene. Nathan met her gaze. Thank you. Reeves nodded. We'll get Lawrence. He can't have gone far. But even as she said it, Nathan had a sinking feeling in his gut. Men like Lawrence Sterling always had an escape plan. They spent the next 3 hours at the police station. Ellie was examined by paramedics. Shaken, but physically unharmed. She gave a statement to a child specialist, describing how two men had come into her room and taken her while she was sleeping. Nathan answered every question the FBI asked, even though he was exhausted and running on pure adrenaline. Vivian sat beside him the whole time, silent but present. When they were finally allowed to leave, it was almost dawn. Marcus met them outside the station with Chloe, who'd been too scared to sleep without Vivian. The moment Chloe saw them, she ran straight to Vivian, wrapping her small arms around her aunt's waist. Vivian held her tight, whispering reassurances. Nathan carried Ellie to the truck. She'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, completely drained. The drive home was silent, except for the soft sounds of the girls sleeping in the back seat. Nathan's hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. Vivian reached over and covered one of his hands with hers. "You saved her." Nathan's throat tightened. "We both did." Vivian squeezed his hand. "I thought we were going to die in there." "Me too," Nathan admitted. They pulled into the driveway as the first light of dawn broke over the lake. Nathan carried Ellie upstairs and tucked her into bed. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, her small hand clutching his shirt. Nathan sat beside her for a long time, just watching her breathe. He'd come so close to losing her. Too close. When he finally went back downstairs, he found Vivian sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. Nathan sat down beside her. "You okay?" Vivian shook her head. "No, but I will be." Nathan put his arm around her and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the sun fully rose, neither of them speaking, just holding on to each other in the quiet. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. It was Agent Reeves. Nathan answered, "Did you find him?" There was a pause. Then Reeves said, "We found his car abandoned near the Canadian border, but Lawrence is gone." Nathan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean gone?" "He had help," Reeves said. "Someone picked him up. We're running down leads, but right now he's in the wind." Nathan closed his eyes. "So he got away." "For now," Reeves said. "But we've issued an international warrant, and we've frozen his assets. He can run, but he can't hide forever." Nathan wanted to believe that, but he wasn't sure he did. "What about the men who were with him?" Nathan asked. "All in custody," Reeves said. "And they're talking. We've got enough to build a solid case against Lawrence. When we find him, he's going away for a long time." Nathan exhaled slowly. "Thanks for the update." "Get some rest, Mr. Carter," Reeves said. "You've earned it." The line went dead. Nathan set the phone down and looked at Vivian. "He's gone," Nathan said quietly. Vivian's expression didn't change. "He'll come back. Men like him always do." Nathan pulled her closer. "Then we'll be ready." Vivian looked up at him, and Nathan saw something shift in her eyes, fear giving way to resolve. "Yes," she said quietly. "We will." The next few days were a blur. The media had a field day with Lawrence's disappearance and the warehouse shootout. The story dominated every news cycle: corrupt executive, kidnapped children, dramatic rescue. Vivian's lawyers filed motions to reinstate her as CEO, arguing that she'd been removed under false pretenses orchestrated by Lawrence and Caldwell. The board, suddenly scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal, agreed to an emergency vote. Vivian was reinstated 3 days later. Richard Caldwell resigned in disgrace and lawyered up, trying to cut a deal with the FBI in exchange for testimony against Lawrence. Claire was released from the hospital and moved into the mansion with Vivian, Nathan, and the girls. She was still fragile, still traumatized, but she was healing. And slowly, the pieces of their shattered lives started to come back together. Nathan reopened his auto shop with Sterling Dynamics funding, just like Vivian had promised months ago. Ellie's surgery was a complete success. She was healthier than she'd been in years. Chloe started speaking again, hesitant at first, then more confidently. The sound of her laughter filled the house, and Nathan and Vivian stopped pretending their marriage was fake. One night, about 2 weeks after the warehouse, Nathan found Vivian in her office. She was staring at a news article about Lawrence, who was still missing. Nathan leaned against the doorframe. "You think he's ever coming back?" Vivian looked up at him. "I don't know. Part of me hopes he does, just so I can watch him go to prison." Nathan walked over and sat on the edge of her desk. "And the other part? Vivian sighed. The other part just wants to move on, to stop looking over my shoulder, to stop being afraid. Nathan reached out and took her hand. You will. We all will. Vivian looked at their joined hands. The contract expires in 6 months. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. I know. Vivian met his gaze. I don't want you to leave. Nathan smiled. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Vivian's breath caught. You mean that? Nathan stood up and pulled her to her feet. Vivian, I stopped thinking of this as a contract the moment I realized I was falling for you. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. When was that? Nathan thought about it. Probably the night you kissed me in the kitchen, or maybe before that. I don't know. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the money and started being about you, about us. Vivian's smile was watery but real. I love you. Nathan's chest tightened. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. I love you too, Nathan said. And then he kissed her, and it felt like everything they'd fought for, everything they'd survived, had led to this moment. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his. What do we do now? She asked. Nathan smiled. We live, we raise the girls, we rebuild, and we stop letting other people control our lives. Vivian laughed softly. That's simple? That's simple, Nathan said. And for the first time in a long time, Nathan actually believed it. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe again after nearly drowning. Nathan went back to work at his garage, but it felt different now. The space had been renovated with Sterling Dynamics money, new equipment, fresh paint, proper heating that actually worked through Montana winters. Customers started coming back, then new ones appeared, drawn by word of mouth and the strange celebrity that came from being connected to the Sterling scandal. Nathan hated the attention, but he couldn't deny it was good for business. Ellie returned to school, though Nathan kept her home for the first week, just to make sure she was really okay. She had nightmares for a while, waking up crying, convinced someone was in her room. Nathan would sit with her until she fell back asleep, sometimes staying there all night in the chair beside her bed. The school counselor said it was normal. Trauma took time to heal. Nathan was learning that the hard way. Chloe started at the same school, and having Ellie there seemed to help her adjust. The two girls were inseparable now, more like sisters than cousins. Chloe still carried her sketchbook everywhere, but now it was filled with drawings of happier things. The house, the lake, her and Ellie building snowmen. Claire moved into one of the guest bedrooms and started therapy 3 times a week. She was getting stronger, physically and mentally, though she still flinched at loud noises and avoided talking about the 6 months she'd spent in that basement. Agent Reeves came by once a week with updates on the investigation. Lawrence was still missing, but his financial network was being systematically dismantled. Every shell company, every hidden account, every piece of the operation he'd built was being exposed and frozen. Caldwell had turned state's evidence and was cooperating fully, providing testimony that would ensure Lawrence spent the rest of his life in prison if he was ever caught. But months passed, and Lawrence remained a ghost. Vivian threw herself back into running Sterling Dynamics with the same intensity she'd had before, but something had shifted. She came home earlier now. She ate dinner with the family. She stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. And she smiled more. Nathan noticed all of it, the way you notice spring arriving after a brutal winter, slowly at first, then all at once. One evening in early April, Nathan was cooking dinner when Vivian came home and actually looked surprised to find him in the kitchen. You're home early, she said. Nathan glanced at the clock. It was barely 6. I'm always home by 6. Vivian set her briefcase down, looking almost embarrassed. I know, I meant I'm home early. Nathan smiled. Progress. Vivian walked over and kissed him, and Nathan still wasn't used to how normal that felt now. How right. Where are the girls? Vivian asked. Living room, homework, and a very serious debate about which movie to watch tonight. Vivian poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter, watching Nathan cook. Claire's therapist thinks she's ready to testify. Nathan looked up. Really? Vivian nodded. The trial's been scheduled, 3 months from now. Claire will be the prosecution's star witness. Nathan set down the wooden spoon he'd been using. How does she feel about that? Terrified, Vivian admitted. But determined. She wants to make sure Lawrence pays for what he did. To her, to me, to all of us. Nathan reached out and squeezed Vivian's hand. She's stronger than she thinks. So are you, Vivian said quietly. Nathan didn't know how to respond to that, so he just went back to cooking. They ate dinner together as a family that night, all 5 of them crowded around the kitchen table, talking over each other, laughing at Ellie's terrible jokes, watching Chloe carefully build a tower out of her green beans before Ellie knocked it over. It was chaotic and messy, and nothing like the cold, silent dinners Vivian used to eat alone in this house. And Nathan realized this was what Vivian had been missing her entire life. Not control, not success, not power. Just people who loved her. After dinner, Nathan helped the girls with their homework, while Vivian and Claire talked quietly in the living room. When he came back downstairs later, he found them looking through old photo albums, pictures of Claire and Vivian as kids, their parents smiling in the background. Claire was crying, but they were the good kind of tears. Vivian looked up when Nathan walked in. We're boring you with family history. You take short parts. Nathan sat down on the arm of the couch. Not bored, just listening. Claire wiped her eyes and showed Nathan a photo of 2 little girls building a sandcastle on a beach somewhere. This was the summer before Dad died. We went to California. Vivian spent the entire week trying to build the perfect sandcastle. Did you succeed? Nathan asked Vivian. Vivian smiled. No. The tide came in and destroyed it 5 minutes after I finished. She cried for an hour, Claire added, laughing through her tears. I was 8, Vivian said defensively. Nathan looked at the photo, trying to imagine Vivian as a little girl who cried over sandcastles. It was hard to reconcile with the woman he'd met in his garage 6 months ago. Cold, controlled, untouchable. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never really had. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Nathan found Vivian standing on the deck overlooking the lake. The spring air was still cold, but the ice had finally melted, and moonlight reflected off the dark water. Nathan wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and stood beside her. You okay? He asked. Vivian nodded. Just thinking. About? Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, about how different everything is now. 6 months ago, I was alone in this house. No family, no real friends. Just me and a company I was slowly destroying myself to protect. Nathan didn't interrupt. And now I have Claire back. I have Chloe. I have you and Ellie. I have a life that feels real for the first time in years. Vivian looked at him. And it terrifies me. Nathan frowned. Why? Because I don't know how to keep it, Vivian admitted. I don't know how to be this person. The one who cooks breakfast and reads bedtime stories and goes to parent-teacher conferences. I spent my entire adult life being someone else. Nathan pulled her closer. Then you learn, same as the rest of us. Vivian leaned into him. What if I'm not good at it? You're already good at it, Nathan said. You just don't see it yet. Vivian looked up at him, and Nathan saw the vulnerability in her eyes. The same vulnerability he'd seen that night in the warehouse, when she'd thought they were going to die. I love you, Vivian said, and that scares me more than anything Lawrence ever did. Nathan's chest tightened. Why? Because I've never had something I was this afraid of losing. Nathan cupped her face in his hands. You're not going to lose me, or the girls, or any of this. We're here. We're staying. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Promise? Nathan kissed her forehead. I promise. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in the blanket, watching the moonlight dance across the water. And Nathan realized something he'd been too busy surviving to notice before. He was happy. Not the temporary kind of happy that comes from a good day or a lucky break. The deep, settled kind of happy that comes from building a life you actually want to live. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected, and Nathan wouldn't trade it for anything. 2 months later, Agent Reeves called with news. Lawrence Sterling had been found. He'd been hiding in Argentina under a fake name, living in a beach house and apparently planning to disappear permanently. But someone had recognized him. A former Sterling Dynamics employee who'd lost their job when the company restructured after the scandal. The employee had called the FBI, and Lawrence was arrested within hours. He was being extradited back to the United States to stand trial. When Nathan told Vivian, she didn't react the way he expected. She didn't celebrate. She didn't look relieved. She just nodded and said, "Good." That night, Nathan found her in her office, staring at a photo of her father. "You think he'd be disappointed in me?" Vivian asked quietly. Nathan sat down beside her. "Why would he be disappointed?" "Because I almost lost everything he built," Vivian said. "Because I trusted the wrong people. Because I was so focused on the company that I didn't see what Lawrence was doing until it was too late." Nathan took the photo from her hands and looked at it, a man in his 50s, smiling, with Vivian's eyes. "I think he'd be proud of you." Vivian shook her head. "How can you say that?" "Because you didn't give up," Nathan said. "You fought back. You protected your family. You rebuilt what Lawrence tried to destroy. That's not failure. That's strength." Vivian's voice broke. "It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I barely survived." Nathan set the photo down and turned to face her. "That's what strength looks like, Vivian. It's not about being perfect or never getting knocked down. It's about getting back up when everything's falling apart." Vivian looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't have done it without you." Nathan pulled her into his arms. "Yeah, you could have, but you didn't have to. That's the difference." Vivian cried into his shoulder, and Nathan just held her, letting her release months of fear and pain and exhaustion she'd been holding on to. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "I'm a mess." "You're human," Nathan corrected. "There's a difference." Vivian smiled through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" Nathan shrugged. "I've had a lot of practice surviving impossible situations." Vivian kissed him, soft and grateful. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me," Vivian said quietly. "The real me. Not the CEO or the Ice Queen or any of the other things people call me. Just me." Nathan cupped her face. "That's the only version I've ever wanted to see." The trial began in late June. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former Sterling Dynamics employees, investors, and people who just wanted to watch a powerful man finally face consequences. Nathan sat in the gallery beside Claire, holding her hand as she waited to testify. She looked terrified, her face pale, her hands shaking. "You don't have to do this," Nathan whispered. Claire shook her head. "Yes, I do." When her name was called, Claire stood up, smoothed her dress, and walked to the witness stand with her head held high. Nathan watched her take the oath, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. And then she began to speak. She told the courtroom everything. The investigation she'd conducted, the corruption she'd uncovered, the night Lawrence's men had grabbed her outside her apartment and thrown her into a van, the 6 months she'd spent locked in that basement, wondering if she'd ever see her family again. Lawrence sat at the defense table, his expression blank, but Nathan could see the tension in his shoulders. Claire's testimony lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The prosecution rested their case that afternoon, confident they had enough to convict. Lawrence's lawyers tried to argue self-defense, claiming Nathan and Vivian had attacked Lawrence first in the warehouse. But the evidence was overwhelming: financial records, emails, testimony from Caldwell, and the armed men who'd been arrested, and Claire's devastating account of her captivity. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Lawrence Sterling was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. When the judge read the verdict, Vivian reached over and squeezed Nathan's hand so hard it hurt. But Nathan didn't pull away. He just squeezed back. That night, they celebrated at the house. It wasn't a big party, just Nathan, Vivian, Claire, Ellie, Chloe, and Marcus, who'd become something of an honorary family member over the past few months. They ordered pizza and ate it straight from the boxes, sitting on the living room floor like kids at a sleepover. Claire looked lighter than Nathan had seen her in months, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "It's really over," she said, almost disbelieving. Vivian smiled. "It's really over." Ellie raised her soda can. "To bad guys going to jail." Everyone laughed and clinked their drinks together. Chloe, who'd been quiet most of the evening, suddenly spoke up. "Can we go to the lake tomorrow?" Everyone stopped and stared at her. It was the first time Chloe had initiated a plan, the first time she'd asked for something she wanted instead of just going along with what everyone else decided. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, we can absolutely go to the lake tomorrow. Chloe grinned, and it was like watching the sun come out after a storm. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Nathan and Vivian sat on the deck again, wrapped in the same blanket, watching the stars. I keep waiting for something else to go wrong, Vivian admitted. Nathan understood that feeling. Maybe nothing else will. Vivian looked at him skeptically. You really believe that? Nathan thought about it. No. Life's messy. Things will go wrong, but we'll handle them, together. Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. I never thought I'd have this. Have what? A family, Vivian said. People who love me not because of what I can do for them, but just because of who I am. Nathan kissed the top of her head. You deserve it. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, The contract expires next week. Nathan had been trying not to think about that. I know. I don't want to renew it, Vivian said. Nathan's stomach dropped. What? Vivian pulled back and looked at him, a small smile on her face. I don't want a contract anymore, Nathan. I want a real marriage. Nathan stared at her, his heart pounding. Are you asking me to marry you? For real this time? Vivian's smile widened. I think I am. Nathan laughed, the sound bursting out of him before he could stop it. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It boss batich. Vivian shoved him playfully. Then you do it better. Nathan stood up, pulling Vivian to her feet. He took both her hands and looked into her eyes. Vivian Sterling, he said, 6 months ago, you walked into my garage and offered me a deal that sounded completely insane, and I took it because I was desperate and out of options. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the money. It stopped being about survival, and it started being about you, about us, about building something real together. Vivian's eyes were shining with tears. Nathan continued, You're brilliant and stubborn, and you work too hard, and you're terrible at accepting help. But you're also brave and loyal, and you love fiercer than anyone I've ever met. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not because of a contract, not because we need each other, but because I choose you. Every single day. Vivian was full-on crying now. Nathan smiled. So yeah, let's get married for real this time. Vivian threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, absolutely yes. Nathan kissed her, and it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Like every hard thing they'd survived had led them exactly here. To this moment, this choice, this life. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony by the lake. No reporters, no board members, no drama. Just family and a handful of close friends. Ellie and Chloe were flower girls, giggling the entire time and throwing petals everywhere except where they were supposed to go. Claire stood beside Vivian as her maid of honor, looking healthy and whole and happy. Marcus stood beside Nathan as his best man, giving him a hard time right up until the moment the ceremony started. And when Nathan and Vivian said their vows, real ones this time, written by them, for them, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Afterward, they had dinner on the deck overlooking the lake, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Nathan stood at the edge of the deck, watching his daughter dance with Chloe, watching Claire laugh at something Marcus said, watching Vivian talk to the small handful of friends they'd invited, and he thought about how far they'd all come. 6 months ago, he'd been a desperate single father with $17 in his bank account and a daughter who needed a surgery he couldn't afford. Now, he had a wife he loved, a family that felt real, a business that was thriving, and a future that didn't feel like it was closing in on him anymore. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was theirs. Vivian walked over and slipped her hand into his. What are you thinking about? Nathan smiled. How lucky I am. Vivian leaned into him. We both are. They stood there together, watching the sun set over the lake, and Nathan realized something important. Survival wasn't the same as living. For years he'd been surviving, barely keeping his head above water, fighting to make it through each day. But this was living. and it was worth every hard moment it had taken to get here. A year later, Nathan stood in the same spot on the deck, holding a very different kind of celebration. Ellie had just finished her last round of follow-up appointments, and the doctors had declared her completely healthy. No complications, no relapses, just a normal, healthy kid. Chloe had started therapy and was thriving, talking freely now, making friends at school, even joining the art club. Claire had moved into her own apartment in town and started working part-time at a nonprofit that helped trauma survivors. She still came to Sunday dinners at the house, and she was dating someone, a kind, patient man who made her laugh. Sterling Dynamics was stronger than ever, with Vivian at the helm and a completely restructured board that actually supported her vision. And Nathan's garage had expanded into a second location, with 3 employees and more business than he knew what to do with. But the best news came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in November. Vivian had been feeling sick for a week, and Nathan had finally convinced her to see a doctor. When she came home that evening, she had a strange expression on her face. Nathan looked up from where he was helping Chloe with homework. "What's wrong?" Vivian set her purse down slowly. "Nothing's wrong. Go." Nathan stood up. "Then why do you look like that?" Vivian's mouth twitched into a smile. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Nathan stared at her, not sure he'd heard correctly. "What?" Thus Vivian's smile widened. "I'm pregnant. 8 weeks." Nathan crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. Vivian laughed, the sound bright and free. "Nathan, put me down!" Nathan set her down but didn't let go. "We're having a baby?" Vivian nodded, tears in her eyes. "We're having a baby." Ellie and Chloe came running in from the other room, demanding to know what all the commotion was about. When Nathan told them, both girls screamed and started jumping up and down, and suddenly the kitchen was filled with noise and laughter and joy. Later that night, after the girls had finally calmed down and gone to bed, Nathan and Vivian lay together in their room, Vivian's head on Nathan's chest. "Are you scared?" Nathan asked quietly. Vivian thought about it. "A little, but mostly I'm just happy." Nathan tightened his arms around her. "Me too." They lay in comfortable silence for a while. Then Vivian said, "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you'd said no that night, if you'd turned down my offer?" Nathan had thought about it, more than once. "Yeah," he admitted, "but I can't imagine that version of my life anymore." Vivian looked up at him. "Neither can I." Nathan kissed her forehead. "Then I guess we made the right choice." Vivian smiled. "Yeah, I guess we did." Inets. 5 years later, Nathan stood in the kitchen of the house by the lake, making breakfast for 6 people. Ellie was 13 now, already taller than Vivian and complaining about homework. Chloe was 11, shy but confident in a way she'd never been before. Her sketchbooks now filled with dreams instead of nightmares. And running between them was 3-year-old Mason Carter, a whirlwind of energy with Vivian's dark hair and Nathan's stubborn determination. Vivian walked into the kitchen carrying their youngest, 6-month-old Emma, and looking exhausted but happy. "Coffee," she said, handing Emma to Nathan. "I need coffee." Nathan juggled the baby and the pancakes he was flipping. "There's a fresh pot." Vivian poured herself a cup and collapsed into a chair. "How do people do this with more than 2 kids?" Nathan laughed. "No idea, we're barely managing." It was chaos. The house was always loud, always messy, always full of life. And Nathan loved every second of it. Because this messy, imperfect, beautiful life was everything he'd never known he wanted. Ellie grabbed a pancake off the plate Nathan had just made and took a bite. "Dad, we're supposed to write about someone we admire for English class. Can I write about you?" Nathan's chest tightened. "You admire me?" Ellie rolled her eyes. "Obviously. You literally saved my life multiple times." Nathan smiled. "You can write about whoever you want, kiddo." "Cool, because I'm actually writing about Mom," Ellie said, grinning at Vivian. "She's more impressive." Vivian laughed so hard she nearly spit out her coffee. Nathan shook his head, but he was smiling too. Later, after the kids were all fed and chaos had settled into manageable disorder, Nathan found himself standing on the deck again, looking out at the lake. The water was calm today, reflecting the blue sky like a mirror. Vivian came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Nathan thought about the question. He thought about the desperate man he'd been 6 years ago, standing in a failing garage with $17 and no hope. He thought about the cold, guarded woman who'd stepped out of a black SUV and offered him an impossible deal. And he thought about everything that had happened since, the fear, the danger, the moments when they'd almost lost everything. But mostly, he thought about the family they'd built together, the life they'd fought for, the love they'd chosen. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst moments in your life lead you exactly where you're supposed to be," Nathan said finally. Vivian rested her head against his back. "Yeah, they do." They stood there together, watching the sunlight dance across the water, while inside the house their children laughed and argued and lived. And Nathan realized something he wished he could tell his younger self, the man who'd been drowning in debt and fear and desperation. Sometimes survival is just the beginning. The real story starts when you stop running from life and start building one worth living. And that's exactly what they'd done. Together.